Welcome to Science for Sleepy Minds. I'm glad you're here, right at the edge of your day, in that quiet hour when your body wants to soften and your thoughts want to slow down. If you're feeling tired or a little restless, or as if your mind is still carrying the shapes of earlier conversations and unfinished tasks, you don't have to push any of that away. You can simply let it sit beside you like a coat folded on a chair while you settle into something calmer. Tonight, we're taking a slow, gentle journey into one of the oldest questions we have. How life began, not as a puzzle you need to solve and not as a test you need to pass, but as a warm, unhurried story of chemistry and time. We'll move step by step, from familiar ideas to deeper ones, like walking down a quiet path where the light is soft and the air is still. And from the beginning, I want you to know something simple. It is perfectly okay to fall asleep at any moment. You don't have to stay awake for the whole explanation. You don't have to remember everything. If you drift, the story will keep going in the background like gentle weather, like a tide that doesn't need your attention to keep moving. We'll keep the pace slow. No sharp edges, no intensity. Just careful science spoken softly, with room to breathe. If your mind wanders, that's fine. If you catch a few ideas and miss a few others, that's also fine. You're safe here, and you can let learning be light, like holding a feather rather than a weight. This space is for relaxation and gentle curiosity. Together. There's no pressure to keep up, no pressure to be perfect. You're allowed to listen the way you listen to rain, or the way you listen to distant waves. Sometimes you notice the details, sometimes you don't. Either way, you rest. And if you'd like to support this channel, you can gently like and subscribe, only if it feels easy, only if it helps you find your way back to calm another night. And now we can let that thought float away and return to something quiet. So take a slow breath in through your nose if that feels comfortable. Let it be cool and clean, like night air coming in through a barely open window. And let the breath out in a long, warm release, as if you're fogging a window with softness. Again, a gentle inhale, cool and simple, and a slow exhale, warm and letting go. You don't have to count, you don't have to do it perfectly. Just a few soft breaths, like the ocean practicing its own slow rhythm. Now, if it feels good, let your forehead loosen. You might notice you've been holding it slightly tight as if you were still concentrating on something. Let the muscles around your eyes soften. Let your jaw unclench, the tongue resting gently as if you're finishing a long sentence and finally setting it down. Allow your shoulders to sink, even a few millimeters, as though gravity is kind and patient. Let your hands rest heavier in the blankets, the fingers uncurled. Let your chest and belly rise and fall without effort. And if there's tension in your legs, in your thighs or calves or feet, imagine it melting slowly, like snow warming under a gentle morning sun, not rushing, not collapsing, just turning into water and disappearing into the earth. If you need to adjust your pillow or shift the blanket or find a more comfortable angle for your neck, you can do that now. Tiny movements are welcome. Sometimes one small change makes the body sigh in relief. Imagine you're settling into a quiet nest, and everything is being arranged for comfort, not perfection. And now, if you like, picture a warm light in the center of your chest or low in your belly. Nothing bright, just a soft golden warmth, like the glow of a lantern behind frosted glass. With each inhale, the light swells slightly. With each exhale, it steadies, calm and constant. And you can let that warm light remind you in a simple way that you are safe and you are allowed to rest. As you settle, the story begins far away from this room, in a time that doesn't hurry. Imagine a night sky without city lights, deep and clear. Below it, an ocean stretches into darkness, wide and quiet, breathing in slow waves. The shoreline is simple, rock and water meeting, then separating, then meeting again, as though they're learning each other by repetition. Above, clouds drift slowly, and the air feels warm, like a world still holding on to its own inner heat. This is an early Earth, imagined gently, not with drama, not with alarm, but with a kind of ancient calm. In the distance you might see a soft glow on the horizon, like far-off embers behind hills, a reminder that the planet is alive with warmth beneath its surface. The ocean keeps its rhythm, and the rocks keep their patient silence. Mist lingers near the water, turning the edges of everything soft, and as you listen, you can let the scene be more like a dream than a documentary. You don't need every detail, you can simply feel the hush, the slow movement, the long quiet. Now, picture yourself drifting closer, as if you were floating above the coastline, then lowering gently like a feather falling. From the curve of the planet to a single stretch of shore, from the wide sky to a small meeting place where water pools in a shallow pocket of stone, a tide pool-like edge, a little bowl of ocean left behind when the water recedes. In that small place the scale of things changes. Tiny bubbles gather and pop. Thin films spread across water and then break. Minerals in the rock dissolve in small amounts, colouring the water invisibly. The sun warms the surface during the day, and at night the air pattern cools it again. Wet, dry. Warm, cool, over and over. Not frantic, just rhythmic. And it's here, in little repeating places like this, that we can begin to imagine how life might have started. Not as a sudden spark, but as step-by-step chemistry learning to organise itself. Science, in a story like this, is not a harsh spotlight. It's more like a lantern held low, helping us see shapes without forcing them. There are things we know with good confidence, and there are open questions and gentle debates and multiple possible pathways, and all of that is okay. The goal tonight is not to reach certainty. It's to walk slowly through the landscape of ideas, so you can carry one quiet question with you, like a smooth stone in your pocket. How does simple matter learn the shape of living? You don't need to answer it. Just let it rest in your mind, and if your mind drifts away from it, let that happen too. To begin, we should start with something ordinary and close to home. What do we mean when we say something is alive? If you think of a house plant, or a cat curled in sleep, or your own body rising and falling with breath, you notice some simple themes. Living things take in energy. They use it. They change. They can grow. They can repair themselves. And in some way they can make more life, creating copies, creating descendants. There's a gentle comparison some people like. A flame can keep its shape by feeding, by taking in fuel and oxygen, and releasing heat and light. A flame is not alive, but it has a certain living-like pattern. It's a process that continues as long as the conditions support it. That idea can help us soften our thinking. Life is less like a solid object and more like a continuing pattern. A moving, staying thing. Scientists often use a kind of checklist, not as a strict gate, but as a set of clues. Metabolism meaning the chemical ways of using energy. Boundaries meaning some inside and outside, like a cell membrane. Information meaning a way to store patterns and pass them on. Reproduction, the ability to make something similar to itself. And evolution, the slow change over generations guided by what persists and what doesn't. You don't have to memorize any of that. You can let it be a soft set of stepping stones. When we look back toward the beginning, we can ask, which stone came first? Which clue arrived early and which clue arrived later? And it's comforting, in a way, to remember that definitions blur at the edges. Nature loves gradients. Dawn is not a switch, it's a slow brightening. The shoreline is not a line, it's sand, foam, wet rock, dry rock, all changing with every wave. In the same way, the beginning of life was likely not one crisp moment. It was probably a gradual becoming, a long dawn. So tonight, we can think of life as a process, like a song that exists while it is being played. A song is not a single object you can hold in your palm, it's a pattern in time. Notes in the air, ordered and repeated. Life, in this gentle view, is matter moving in a social way, continuing itself, maintaining itself and slowly changing. If life is a process, then beginnings make more sense. We can imagine steps leading toward it. Not a leap from dead to alive, but a slope, a shoreline again, a soft gradient. Now let's widen the view a little and come back to that early Earth, not as a scary place, but as a kind of laboratory that ran quietly for an astonishingly long time. Think of a morning when sunlight spills onto a floor and warms it. That warmth feels simple, familiar. On early Earth, sunlight was one source of gentle energy, arriving day after day. Another source was the heat held inside the planet itself, slowly leaking outward, warming the crust and the sea in certain places. And then there were the tides, the patient pull of the moon, lifting and lowering water in slow rhythm, reshaping shorelines in a repeating dance. Water matters so much in this story. Water is a place where molecules can meet, move, and bump into one another. It dissolves some things, carries others, and makes certain reactions easier. You can imagine water as a slow-moving crowd bringing strangers together and then drifting them apart again and again. And on the early Earth, water was everywhere. Oceans, rain, pools, perhaps shallow lagoons, perhaps pores in rock where water sat warm and still. And in the rocks themselves, the world held minerals, tiny crystals and surfaces where molecules could stick, gather, and line up. It can help to imagine it like ingredients laid out on a quiet counter. Water, minerals, simple gases in the air, different temperatures, different places. Some areas more acidic, some more alkaline, some places lit by sun, others shaded and cool. Not one uniform planet, but many small environments, each with its own gentle personality. Energy sources too arrived in different ways. Sunlight steady and daily, lightning occasional and brief like a distant flicker. Volcanic heat, not as an eruption you need to watch, but as warmth rising from below, like a heated stone that stays warm long after the fire is gone. And deep in the ocean, hydrothermal vents, places where hot mineral-rich water seeps into cold seawater, creating gradients. A kind of slow chemical slopes. Gradients are an important word here, but you can hold it lightly. A gradient is just the difference between two places, warm to cool, acidic to alkaline, concentrated to diluted, and wherever there's a difference like that, things tend to move. Nature likes to smooth differences out, and that movement can do work. It can drive chemistry forward. Now, as you rest, let the timescale stretch out. It's easy for the mind to feel impatient because we live in hours and days. But the early Earth had millions of years. That is a kind of patience that feels almost like sleep itself. A slow night that never hurries. Waves repeating, rain falling, rocks weathering, molecules drifting, gathering, scattering, gathering again. Picture waves polishing stones, over and over the same motion, not changing quickly, but changing surely. In that repetition, the world has time to try countless arrangements, time for unlikely combinations to occur, time for small patterns to persist long enough to become something larger. And with that stage set, we can begin to talk about the building blocks of life, softly, as if we're looking at small beads on a string. Think of cooking for a moment. You start with simple ingredients: flour, water, salt, heat. And with mixing and warmth and time, those ingredients become something new, something with a different texture and structure. Life's chemistry is not cooking exactly, but the analogy helps. Heat and mixing and time can transform what's available into more complex forms. The basic molecules that living things use are not mystical. They're in a way practical. Amino acids, which can link together to make proteins. Sugars, which can store energy and build structures. Lipids, fats, which are excellent at forming boundaries in water. And nucleotides, which are like little units that can link into chains. And those chains can carry information. You don't need to picture them precisely. You can picture them as letters or beads or small shapes that click together. Each one has a certain personality. Some like water, some avoid it. Some make stable chains, some hold energy. And when you have many of them floating and mixing, they sometimes form new patterns. We know that some of these building blocks can form naturally under certain conditions. In the middle of the 20th century, there were early experiments that showed simple gases with energy like sparks can produce amino acids. It doesn't mean that experiment exactly describes the ancient Earth, but it says something comforting. Chemistry can make lifelike ingredients without a living hand guiding it. Since then, scientists have explored many different possible pathways. Chemistry in the atmosphere, chemistry in shallow pools with wet and dry cycles, chemistry near hydrothermal vents, chemistry on mineral surfaces, and another pathway, gentle and interesting, is delivery from space. Some meteorites contain organic molecules, meaning the raw ingredients of complex chemistry can travel through the solar system and land on planets like seeds. Not seeds of life itself, but seeds of possibility. So rather than one single doorway, there may have been several quiet entrances into complexity, several ways to build the starting pieces, and in that idea, there's something soothing. The universe is not brittle. It doesn't rely on one perfect coincidence. It often offers multiple routes to the same destination. Life's beginning, then, might not have been one bright spotlight moment. It may have been many small lamps lit over time, each one adding a little more light, a little more structure. Now, once you have building blocks, there's another gentle question. How do they become organized? How do they stop being just a soup of parts and begin behaving like a system? To understand that, it helps to start with something you might have seen with your own eyes. Soap bubbles. If you have ever mixed soap in water and watched bubbles form, you've seen self-organization. You didn't carefully sculpt those bubbles. You didn't instruct them to become spheres. They do it because of physics. Because certain shapes are more stable, because surfaces prefer to minimize tension. This is one of nature's quiet talents. Under the right conditions, order can appear on its own. Not perfect order, not planned order, but spontaneous patterns. Snowflakes, sand ripples, honeycomb-like shapes. And in chemistry too, some molecules have a habit of assembling into structures. For example, certain fatty molecules, lipids, have a head that likes water and a tail that dislikes it. When you put many of them into water, they arrange themselves to make everyone comfortable. Heads outward toward water, tails tucked inward away from it. And this can create little spheres or layers or tiny droplets with boundaries. It's like blankets folding around warmth. Not because the blankets are thinking, but because the folding is simply what happens. Self-assembly is a restful idea. It means the universe has built-in tendencies, gentle preferences, ways of settling into stability, and those tendencies can be the earliest sculptors of lifelike structures. Another helpful idea is repetition. Remember the wet and dry cycles in tide pools, or hot and cool cycles near vents, or day and night. These cycles are like metronomes, a steady tick that encourages chemistry to repeat. When chemistry repeats, patterns can build. Some reactions are more likely when things are concentrated, such as when water evaporates and leaves molecules closer together. Then when water returns, those molecules can spread again, interact again, and perhaps carry forward what formed before. Over time, repetition can make certain arrangements more common. And then there's the notion of networks. Instead of one reaction happening alone, you can have a chain. Reaction A makes a molecule that helps reaction B. Reaction B makes a molecule that helps reaction C. And sometimes you can have loops where products feed back into earlier steps. You can imagine it like a small village of tradespeople passing materials from house to house. Each person isn't trying to build a city, they're just doing their work. But together a system emerges. The comforting reflection here is that order doesn't always need a planner. Sometimes order is the quiet consequence of rules and time. If you let water flow, it finds channels. If you let wind blow, it makes dunes. If you let molecules mix and repeat and settle, they sometimes make structures that persist. And persistence is important, because the road to life is, in many ways, the road to things that last a little longer than the things around them, things that hold together, things that can maintain a pattern. Now, to approach the idea of the first inside, we can bring our lantern closer to something you already know, the cell. A cell is like a tiny room. It has a boundary, a membrane that separates inside from outside. Not like a locked door, but more like a flexible curtain that can let certain things pass and keep other things close. Inside the cell, chemical reactions happen in a more concentrated space. Outside, the world is broader, more diluted. If you imagine life beginning without any boundary at all, it becomes hard to keep a system together. A useful molecule drifts away. A growing chain breaks apart. But if a simple boundary forms, even a leaky one, then chemistry can start happening in a protected pocket. This is where lipids become especially interesting. Those molecules that dislike water in their tails and like it in their heads, they naturally form layers in watery environments. A bilayer can curl into a closed bubble, and now you have a little container. A simple inside, a simple outside. These early cell-like bubbles are often called protocells. You don't need to hold on to the name, the idea is enough. Little membrane spheres that can contain molecules, concentrate them, allow them to interact more often. If the bubble grows as it collects more lipid molecules, it might even divide, splitting into two smaller bubbles. Not a perfect reproduction, not an engineered process, but a physical tendency. Stretched membranes can pinch, separate, and form new compartments. And it's important for your peace of mind to remember that leaky is not a failure here. Early membranes were likely permeable, letting small molecules move in and out. That leakiness could actually help. A window cracked open brings in fresh air. A membrane that's too strict might starve its own chemistry. A gentle boundary that holds some things while allowing exchange might be just right for an early system. So in this quiet view, life might have begun with the first soft sense of here and not here. A tiny pocket of chemistry held together long enough to do something interesting, long enough to keep a pattern. If you're still awake, you might notice how this story is also a story of comfort. It's about making a safe interior space, a small warm room in a cold wide world, and even if you don't remember the details, you can let that feeling settle into you. The idea of a gentle boundary, a safe inside, a soft place where things can continue. Now, before we go deeper into information and copying, you can take another slow breath. Let your body sink again. Let the bed hold you. The wave rhythm continues. The tide pool waits. The planet does not rush. In the next part of our journey, we'll begin to explore how patterns can be stored and repeated more reliably, how chains of molecules can act a little like recipes, and how variation, even tiny variation, can gently guide change over time. We'll keep it simple, and we'll keep it soft. For now, just rest with what you've heard. Life as a process. Earth as a patient stage. Building blocks forming. Patterns assembling. Boundaries appearing like quiet blankets folding around warmth. And if your mind is already drifting, you can let it drift. Like footprints in sand, the details can smooth away, and still you'll be carried forward by the calm of the story. If you're still awake, welcome back to this gentle thread of thought. There's nothing you need to catch up on. You can simply return to the feeling of being held by the bed, by the quiet, by your own slow breathing. And if you drift in and out while listening, that's completely fine. You're allowed to float along the surface of the story, taking in only what feels easy. In the last moments, we are resting with a few soft ideas. Life as a process, not a sudden switch. The early Earth as a patient stage full of water, minerals, warmth, and repeating cycles. And those first simple boundaries, membrane-like bubbles, forming naturally in water, creating a gentle inside where chemistry could linger. Now we can continue slowly into the next question. How does a living pattern remember itself? How does it copy? If life is a song that continues in time, then information is the way the song's melody can be carried forward. Not perfectly, not rigidly, but reliably enough that the pattern can return again and again. You already know what it is to carry instructions, a recipe written on paper, a set of directions in your phone, or even something older and simpler, like remembering how to tie a knot or where the light switch is in a dark room. Information is any arrangement that can be repeated. In living things, that repeating pattern is carried in molecules, and the most famous of these is DNA, the long stable chain that stores instructions in nearly every organism you know. But for many origin of life ideas, we begin with something close to DNA and yet simpler in certain ways. A molecule called RNA. You don't need to memorize names. You can think of RNA as a cousin of DNA, a kind of single-stranded chain that can carry information, like a ribbon of letters. What makes RNA especially interesting is that it can do more than store a pattern. In some cases, RNA can fold into shapes that help chemical reactions happen. It can behave a little like a tool, not just a record, a molecule that remembers and also acts. When molecules can both store information and do chemistry, something important becomes possible. A system can begin to guide itself, not with intention, not with planning, but with a kind of chemical usefulness. This is why you may sometimes hear about the RNA world idea, which suggests that early on RNA-like molecules may have played a large role before DNA and proteins took over many tasks. It's one hypothesis, one pathway, and it's spoken about because it feels elegantly simple. One kind of molecule doing two jobs. But remember, in this bedtime telling, we don't need to declare a winner. We can hold multiple possibilities as if they are different lanterns in the same fog. Each lantern shows a different shape. So let's stay with the gentle basics. For copying to happen, you need a chain that can serve as a template. Like a strip of patterned fabric you can trace. In DNA and RNA, the letters are chemical units that prefer to pair with certain partners. When you have a strand, complementary units can line up along it, and under the right conditions, they can join into a new strand that matches the original pattern. That is a calm kind of magic, but it's still chemistry. Attraction, fit, matching, repetition. Now here's an important part, and also a soothing one. Early copying was almost certainly imperfect. And that is not a flaw, it's a gift. Imagine handwriting. If you copy a sentence by hand again and again, each version might change slightly. A letter forms differently, a word is misspelled, a line slants. Most of the sentence remains recognizable, but small differences slip in. In chemical copying, small differences also happen. A unit may be swapped, a joining step may fail, a strand may break and rejoin, and those tiny errors create variation. Variation means there will be many slightly different versions of a pattern, and then, quietly, without ambition, without competition, something like selection can begin. Some patterns last longer than others, some copy more often than others, some survive in warmth better, or in saltier water, or inside a membrane bubble. And when a pattern persists, it becomes more common simply because it keeps showing up. This is natural selection in its simplest, sleepiest form. Not a struggle, not a battle, just persistence, like certain pebbles that remain while softer ones crumble, like certain melodies you remember because they repeat, and others fade because they don't. So when we talk about the earliest evolution, we can picture it as almost invisible. Tiny advantages in a quiet sea, a small difference that makes a molecule a little more stable, a little more likely to be copied, a little more likely to remain inside a protocell rather than drift away. If you're listening closely, Bo, you might notice how gentle these forces are. Attraction, fit, repetition, persistence. No one is trying. Things simply continue if they can. And now we can widen our view just a little, because the beginning of life is not just one story. It's a small cluster of stories overlapping and weaving. The RNA world is one lantern, but there are others. Some scientists favor metabolism-first ideas. These suggest that before genetic information became the star of the show, networks of chemical reactions may have organized themselves around energy flow. In this view, life began as a kind of chemical metabolism that found ways to keep cycling, perhaps on mineral surfaces or in porous rocks, with gradients providing the gentle push. Another lantern involves minerals and clays acting as scaffolds. Certain surfaces can help molecules line up, concentrate and react. If you imagine a rocky sponge full of tiny chambers, each chamber can be like a miniature laboratory. Molecules gather in a pore, reactions happen, products drift to the next pore. Over time, patterns could emerge, supported by the physical architecture of stone. And then there are hydrothermal vents again, those deep sea places where warm, mineral-rich water meets cold ocean water. In these environments, gradients are strong and persistent. Some vent systems create natural compartments like tiny cavities lined with minerals. Chemistry there can be fueled by the difference between two waters, the way a battery is fueled by difference between two sides. None of these ideas needs to be frightening. You can imagine them softly, like different rooms in a quiet house. In one room, surface pools and cycles of wet and dry. In another, deep sea vents and warm stone pores. In another, atmospheric chemistry and rain. And perhaps all of them contributed pieces. Perhaps the early Earth tried many approaches at once and life emerged where the pieces happened to fit together. As you rest, you can let that be comforting. The world may have been full of chances. Now, there's a gentle thing to remember about scientific uncertainty. Not knowing every detail is not failure. It's simply the honest shape of the question. The beginning of life happened long ago, and the earliest steps may not leave direct fossils. What we do have are clues, experiments, models, and the ability to see what chemistry does under certain conditions. Science, again, is a lantern. It doesn't demand that the fog vanish. It helps us walk. If you feel sleepy now, you can let yourself sink more deeply into the pillow as these ideas drift by. You don't need to hold every term, you can hold the feeling instead. A world of water and stone and molecules making patterns. Patterns copying imperfectly. Time allowing the useful to linger. And with that, we've reached the end of the 6 main chapters of our slow explanation. We've talked about what life means, Earth's early stage, building blocks, self-organization, boundaries, and information with copying. Now we begin to connect these ideas to something nearer, something that is happening quietly in you right now without you needing to do a thing, because your body is a living continuation of those early principles. Every breath you take depends on boundaries. The tiny membranes in your lungs separate air from blood. In your cells, membranes separate inside from outside, keeping chemistry organized. In fact, every cell in your body is a small room, but it's also a small shoreline where things cross and exchange carefully. When you breathe in, oxygen moves across a boundary. When you breathe out, carbon dioxide leaves, and the movement is gentle. It follows gradients, differences in concentration. Just as early chemistry may have been guided by gradients, your body today is guided by them too, in a quiet, constant way. And metabolism, that using energy clue of life, is also happening in you like a steady hearth. It can feel comforting to imagine metabolism as warmth managed well. A calm, glowing stove, food becomes energy, oxygen helps release it. Cells use it to repair, to maintain, to keep the pattern of you continuing into the next moment. You don't have to manage it consciously. It simply happens, like the body knows its own gentle recipes. In a way, you are walking evidence that matter can be organized into something living, and that it can stay that way, day after day, through countless tiny reactions that remain mostly invisible to your waking mind. Life is Earth's way of making patterns that keep going, and that can sound grand if said loudly, but we can say it softly, as if we're describing the way wind moves through grass. Life is a way for energy and matter to flow through structures. A river moves downhill, shaping its banks. Wind moves through dunes, shaping sand. Life moves energy through chemical pathways, shaping cells and tissues and ecosystem. And here's a quiet wow moment you can hold lightly. The same physics that shapes a raindrop into a round bead, the same surface tension that makes a bubble, also plays a role in the shapes of cells and membranes. The same tendencies that make patterns in non-living matter can, under the right circumstances, support living organization. It's not that life is just physics and chemistry, as if that makes it less special. It is that physics and chemistry are already wondrous, already capable of delicate structure. Life is a particular kind of delicacy within those rules, a complex kind of continuing. Now let's turn our attention outward again, to the natural world, but in a way that feels safe and gentle. When you look at a shoreline today, you can see echoes of early Earth, not because it's identical, but because the same principles are there. Water meeting rock, minerals dissolving, the sun warming surfaces, pools forming and evaporating, cycles repeating. If you've ever stood near a hot spring or watched steam rise from warm water into cool air, you've seen a small version of gradients in motion. Warm and cool meeting, chemistry shifting, mineral stains painting stone in slow colors. And deep in the ocean today, there are hydrothermal vent communities where life thrives in darkness, powered not by sunlight, but by chemical gradients. The organisms there remind us that life can use many kinds of energy. It can find a way to continue even where the surface world feels far away. We can also think about microbes, the tiny simple life forms that exist almost everywhere. Microbes are not primitive in an insulting sense. They are refined by billions of years of evolution. But they can still use chemical strategies that may be quite old. Some microbes can live without oxygen. Some can live in extreme salt, some in heat, some in cold. They show that the space of possible life is broader than our daily experience. And that thought can be comforting too. Life is adaptable, life is inventive, life explores quietly. Now, if you like, we can take a soft step outward into the wider universe without making it feel lonely. The ingredients of organic chemistry are not limited to Earth. We find organic molecules in meteorites and in interstellar clouds. The building blocks, or pieces of them, are scattered through space, like seeds, not of life itself, but of complex chemistry. But what may be rarer is not the ingredients. What may be rarer is the long chain of conditions that allows those ingredients to gather, to concentrate, to form boundaries, to begin copying, to persist. Timing, stability, water in the right places, energy sources that are steady, not only chaotic, a planet that stays habitable long enough for a long dawn to unfold. When we say that aloud, it might sound like a fragile thing, but we can also hear it as gentle and precious, like a candle that burns steadily because the room is calm, like a garden that grows because the seasons turn in the right rhythm. And now we can invite a little philosophical softness, because bedtime is a good time for questions that don't need answers. Is life a destination or a style of change? Is it a thing you either have or don't have? Or is it a way that matter behaves when conditions allow it? If you picture life as a pattern that continues, then death is not a moral failure, and beginnings are not so useless you have to defend. Instead, the universe is full of patterns arising and fading. Waves form and dissolve. Clouds gather and thin. Fires glow and go out. Living patterns begin, persist, and change. And in that long flow of patterns you belong. You belong because your atoms were once in stones and oceans and air, and someday they will return to those places. You belong because the same earth that may have hosted the first protocells now holds you gently in your bed. You belong because you are part of the same story as waves and minerals and starlight. You don't need to do anything with that thought. You can just let it settle like a warm blanket. Now, very softly, let your attention come back to the room, back to the bed beneath you, back to the sensation of fabric, the weight of the blanket, the temperature of the air on your skin, back to the slow rise and fall of your breath. The science can feel like a slow exhale now, interesting but not demanding. And as we move toward a more dreamy phase, we can begin to simplify what we've learned into a few soothing motifs. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, tiny letters of information. You might notice these are gentle words. They don't ask you to focus sharply, they're soft shapes. Water moving and mixing, warmth arriving and fading, minerals steady and patient, bubbles forming and holding a little inside, tiny letters lining up and copying imperfectly kindly, a boundary, a pattern, a patient tide, a boundary, a pattern, a patient tide. You can let those phrases repeat, like waves returning to shore, and now, if it feels pleasant, imagine drifting again through scales, as though you were floating on a slow elevator made of air, far above the stars, then down through a thin layer of atmosphere, clouds drifting like pale blankets, down toward the ocean, where the surface glints faintly under a moonlit sky, down toward a shoreline where waves arrive and withdraw, unhurried, down toward a warm rock, holding sunlight in its body long after the sun has moved away, down toward a shallow pool, water gathered in a small hollow, and in that pool, down still further, into a tiny bubble, a membrane sphere, a simple boundary, a soft inside. Inside, a handful of molecules, not many, just enough to meet each other again and again. Membranes form naturally, patterns repeat. Copying with variation allows change. Membranes form naturally, patterns repeat. Copying with variation allows change. And after each thought, you can let yourself sink. You can let your jaw relax again. Let your shoulders sink. Let your breathing find its own pace, like a slow tide. There are millions of years in this story, and nothing needs to rush. Millions of years, and the world keeps trying small arrangements. Millions of years, and waves keep polishing stone. Millions of years, and tiny bubbles keep forming and dissolving and forming again. Millions of years, and somewhere a pattern lingers. A boundary holding chemistry close, a pattern repeating, a patient tide bringing ingredients, taking them away, bringing them back. If you notice thoughts about your own life drifting in, you don't have to chase them away. You can let them pass through like clouds, and you can return gently to the simple rhythm of the story. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, letters. Inside. Outside, repeat and repeat. Beginnings can be quiet. Understanding can be gentle. Nothing is required tonight. You can listen and drift. You can drift and listen. The story can become more like soft sound now, more like the hush of waves than a lecture. A dark ocean under a wide sky. A warm rock near the shore. A small pool. Gathering, evaporating, gathering again. A membrane bubble folding around warmth like a blanket. A few tiny letters lining up, matching, copying, not perfectly, just enough. And time, kind and patient, allowing what persists to appear a little more often. You're safe, you're held. You don't need to remember, you don't need to solve anything. You can simply rest while the ancient world turns slowly in the background and the quiet journey of life's beginning continues like a lullaby fading gently towards sleep. If you're still awake, you can let yourself settle again without effort. Notice the place where your body meets the bed, the weight of your shoulders, the softness under your hips, the way the blanket makes a gentle boundary around you. An inside and an outside like a calm little world. If your thoughts are moving, that's all right. Thoughts can move like water moves. They can ripple and swirl and then smooth out again. You can take a slow breath in, cool and quiet, and a slow breath out, warm and releasing. And as you breathe, we can return to the simplest shapes of this story, the ones you don't have to hold tightly: water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, tiny letters of information, a boundary, a pattern, a patient tide. You don't need to picture it perfectly, you can let it be hazy, like a dream that's already starting to form. Somewhere far back in time, the ocean is dark and calm. Waves arrive, withdraw, arrive again. A slow rhythm like breathing. In a shallow place near the shore, water gathers in a hollow of rock. The sun warms it during the day, and night cools it gently. Wet and dry, warm and cool, over and over. In that quiet repeating, molecules meet. They drift close and they separate, They return again and again, like people passing each other on a familiar path. Membranes form naturally, a soft film folding into a bubble, because that is how certain molecules prefer to arrange themselves in water. Inside and outside, a simple difference called a gentle container. Patterns repeat, and when patterns repeat, the world begins to remember. Not with a mind, not with intention, but with the calm persistence of what lasts. If it helps, you can imagine that inside the bubble, molecules are like small beads. Some of them bump together and link. A few form short chains, some chains break, some form again. Most arrangements don't last, a few last a little longer. And time is patient. Time does not get frustrated. Time simply allows another try. Copying with variation allows change, not dramatic change, not fast change, just a slow wandering, like a shoreline shifting grain by grain. And you can feel how this story matches the way sleep arrives. Sleep rarely comes like a snap, it comes like a tide, a gradual deepening, a soft surrender. You may be listening now, and you may already be partly elsewhere. That's good. That's allowed. Now let's drift through the scales again, but even more slowly this time, like floating in warm water. Imagine the night sky, high above, scattered with stars. You don't have to name them, you don't have to know constellations, just points of light that do not hurry, shining steadily. Below them the atmosphere, thin and quiet. Below that, clouds like soft blankets drifting. Below that, the ocean dark and wide, and then the shoreline, where the ocean becomes shallow, and the water changes its voice, a softer sound, a gentler lap. And then, closer still, a small place where water rests for a while, a pool, a pocket, a little bowl of the sea. In that pool you can imagine warmth stored in stone. You can imagine minerals slowly dissolving into the water. You can imagine simple molecules arriving, carried by water, carried by wind, carried by rain. Nothing needs to be forced. Everything just arrives. The way dust settles, the way dew forms, or the way a room becomes quiet when you stop moving. In that pool, a bubble forms, a membrane, a boundary, inside a handful of molecules, outside a wide world, inside slightly more concentrated, outside more diluted, and that difference matters. It makes meetings more likely inside, it makes chemistry more intimate, like a small room where voices can be heard more easily. You can let your own room feel like that now, a small safe inside, a warm boundary, a soft darkness. And you can notice your breath as a gentle metronome, just like the cycles of day and night. In, out, in, out. Patterns repeat. The earliest lifelike patterns may have been like breathing too, not lungs, not air, but the basic rhythm of chemistry cycling. A reaction making something, that thing helping another reaction, a loop forming, a slow circuit, energy moving, matter rearranging. And if you want a tiny, easy fact to hold, you can keep this one. Nature likes to smooth differences. When there is a gradient, warm to cool, concentrated to diluted, things move, and in that movement work can be done. In a sense, life is a way of using gradients gently, harvesting difference the way a windmill harvests wind. And even if that feels too technical, you can let it return to the simplest version. Differences make movement. Movement makes change. Change repeated makes patterns. Membranes form naturally. Patterns repeat. Copying with variation allows change. Now let the words soften further. You don't need to follow every sentence, so that you can simply let the sound of the ideas pass over you like a slow stream. Water over stone, Warmth in the rock, minerals in the water, bubbles in the pool, letters. In a chain, inside, outside, repeat, repeat. Sometimes in this story we talk about RNA, a molecule that can carry a pattern and sometimes help reactions happen. But you don't need to remember the name. You can think of it as a ribbon of tiny letters that can fold, a ribbon that can be copied, a ribbon that can make small shapes. And because it can be copied, a pattern can persist beyond a single moment. Because it can vary, the pattern can change. And because some patterns last longer than others, the ones that last become more common. Not through ambition, not through striving, just through staying. Staying is quiet. Staying is gentle. Staying is what happens when the pieces fit. And it can be soothing to think of the earliest evolution as a soft kind of staying. A small improvement in stability, a small improvement in copying. A small improvement in being held inside a bubble. Tiny advantages, like a blanket tucked a little better around the shoulders. Nothing dramatic, just comfort increasing over time. Now you can take a moment to notice your own boundaries again. Your skin, warm and whole. The blanket, soft and steady. The edge of the pillow supporting your cheek. Inside, your body doing its calm chemistry. Outside the room, quiet and still. Inside and outside, a boundary, and because you are safe, your nervous system can loosen. Your breath can slow, your thoughts can become less sharp. If you feel a little anxious, you don't have to fight it. You can treat it like a wave that rises and falls. You can ride it gently, knowing it will pass. And while it passes, we can return to the ocean of time, millions of years. The phrase itself can be a lullaby. Millions of years, and waves keep coming. Millions of years, and the sun keeps warming surfaces. Millions of years, and cooling nights return. Millions of years, and water evaporates, concentrates, returns. Millions of years, and tiny bubbles form and form again. If you want, you can imagine the earth taking long, slow breaths, warmth rising, warmth settling, water moving, water resting, the planet repeating its own relaxed rhythm. And somewhere within that rhythm, chemistry finds a small way to keep going. A loop, a cycle, a network, a pattern that happens again tomorrow, and again the next day, and again for 1,000 days, and again for 1,000,000. Now, let's make the imagery even simpler, even more repetitive, like rocking. Imagine one small bubble in one small pool. Inside the bubble, a few molecules drift. Some stick together, some separate, and then they meet again, over and over. Inside the bubble, a short chain forms. The chain holds a pattern. The chain can sometimes guide the formation of a similar chain. This is not perfect copying. It is gentle copying. The world does not require perfection to begin. It only requires enough stability to last a little longer, enough copying to happen occasionally, enough variation to create differences, enough time for the differences that help to appear more often. Enough. Your body understands enough too. You do not need perfect sleep, you do not need perfect calm, you only need enough softness, enough safety, enough letting go. Sleep can begin in small pieces. A longer exhale, a loose jaw, a shoulder sinking, a thought fading at the edges. Enough is how rest arrives. Now, let's return again to the idea of repetition and cycles, but as a gentle sound, wet and dry, warm and cool, day and night, in and out like breathing, wet and dry, warm and cool, day and night, in and out. If you notice your mind trying to figure it out, you can quietly tell it there is nothing to solve tonight. Understanding can be soft. It can be like listening to the ocean rather than reading a textbook. And if you're someone who likes to know the labels, You can keep one small set of them floating in the background without effort. Building blocks, self-assembly, boundaries, information, copying, variation, selection, through persistent. But you don't need to hold these words. You can let them blur into a melody. Building blocks like beads, self-assembly like bubbles, boundaries like blankets, information like a recipe, copying like handwriting, variation like small differences, persistence like stones that remain, and time like a tide. Now imagine again that early shoreline, but even quieter. The ocean's edge is gentle, the air is warm, mist moves slowly. The rock is smooth in places, rough in others. In small cracks and pores water rests. In those pores minerals line the walls. Molecules stick to those mineral surfaces, gathering more closely than they would in open water. Sometimes they line up. Sometimes a chain forms. Sometimes a chain breaks. Sometimes a chain forms again. And if a bubble drifts past, it might gather some of those molecules into its inside, carrying them like a small boat carrying cargo. A bubble is a boat. A membrane is a hull. Inside, chemistry can travel. Outside, the ocean moves slowly. This is a gentle way to think about protocells. Small containers, drifting, collecting, dividing. Not alive in the full sense we usually mean, not yet, but life adjacent. Life leak or leaning, a dawn, not yet a day, and as you listen, you might notice that the question, when does life begin, becomes less important than the feeling, how does life become? How does a pattern gradually gain the ability to continue itself? How does a boundary become useful? How does copying become more reliable? How does a system become a little more steady? These are soft questions. You don't need to answer them. You can let them be like stars you can glance at and then close your eyes again. Now, let's do a tiny relaxation again, because it's easy for the body to tighten without noticing. Relax the muscles around your eyes. Let your tongue rest. Soften your throat. Let your shoulders settle down and away from your ears. Unclench your hands, loosen your belly, let your legs become heavy. And as you exhale, imagine the warm light inside you growing steadier, calmer, like a small hearth that does not need attention. In that warm light, the science becomes gentler still. Membranes form naturally. They do it because of the way molecules behave in water. Patterns repeat. They do it because cycles repeat, and repeating gives chemistry another chance. Copying with variation allows change. It does it because imperfect repetition creates differences, and differences can be tested quietly by time. Now, consider a comforting thought. The beginning of life was not trying to become you. It was not aiming for complexity, it was simply continuing the way a small stream continues down a slope. Complexity can emerge without being planned, like a forest growing from seeds, like a coastline becoming intricate through waves, like a lace pattern forming when simple rules repeat. You are the far, far later result of countless quiet continuations, and that can make you feel less alone, less separate. Your body is not an accident in a meaningless void. Your body is a continuation of the same physics and chemistry that shapes clouds and stones and seas. You're made of the world, and the world is gentle enough to hold you. Now we can return to the universe for a moment softly. In space there are clouds of molecules, cold and thin, where atoms meet and bond in slow motion. There are comets and meteorites that carry organic ingredients. There are planets with water ice and worlds with warm interiors. The universe is not empty of chemistry, it is full of it. And yet life as we know it seems to require a long chain of calm circumstances. A world stable enough, a temperature range gentle enough, water present in the right place, energy sources that can be used without destroying delicate patterns. Time, so much time, and in that you can sense a quiet gratitude. Not a dramatic gratitude, just a soft appreciation for the steadiness that allowed life to begin here. Steadiness, patience, cycles, small chances repeated. Now the words can become even more meditative, like a lullaby being hummed rather than spoken. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, letters, inside, outside, repeat. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, letters, inside, outside, repeat. And if you fall asleep now, the repetition will keep rocking you gently. If you're still awake, you can let yourself sink deeper into it. You can imagine the ocean again, breathing, in, out, waves arriving, waves leaving, a patient tide, and you can imagine, inside one small bubble in one small pool, a pattern copying itself, imperfectly, kindly, just enough. And then another bubble, and another, not because the world is trying to make something grand, but because the world is allowed to be creative when it has time. Now here is another tiny, soothing fact you can keep if you like. Life today is still about boundaries and gradients. Your cells maintain differences between inside and outside, and they use those differences to do work, to make energy, to build, to repair. That means that the ancient principles are not gone. They are here, in you, right now, in every quiet moment of your resting body. So as you lie here, you can imagine your own cells like countless tiny lanterns, each one softly maintaining a boundary, each one quietly using gradients, each one holding information, each one continuing the patterns of you. You don't have to do anything for them. They know, they continue, and that can be deeply calming. You're being cared for by your own biology. You're being held by your own inner steadiness. Now, let's return to the feeling of time as an ocean, because it's one of the gentlest images we have. Millions of years, like a wide, slow sea, waves of day and night, waves of seasons, waves of wet and dry, waves of warmth and coolness. And within those waves small patterns arise, most fade, some remain a little longer, some become more common, some learn in their own chemical way to keep going. Nothing needs to rush. Sleep doesn't rush, it comes when it comes, it arrives like a tide, not like a command. So if you're not asleep yet, that's okay. You can trust that your body knows how to drift. You can trust that the repetition is helping. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, letters, a boundary, a pattern, a patient tide. You can notice your breath again, in, out, in, out. And perhaps between one exhale and the next inhale there is a small pause, a tiny stillness, a quiet gap where thoughts soften. You can rest in that gap. Then another breath comes, then another exhale, and the world continues kindly. Now imagine the shoreline fading into even softer focus. The ocean becomes a dark, gentle texture. The sky becomes a deep, calm blanket. The distant glow becomes a faint warmth, like a candle behind a wall. And the small pool becomes a simple circle of water, barely moving. In that circle the bubble rests. In that bubble the pattern rests. And you, here in your bed, rest too. A bubble within blankets, a boundary within the night. A pattern of breath repeating. And it's safe to let go. It's safe to stop tracking every word. It's safe to drift down, down, down. The way a leaf drifts on a slow stream, the way a cloud thins into the sky. Beginnings can be quiet. Understanding can be gentle. Nothing is required tonight. You're safe. You're held. And you can let the story keep flowing like water over smooth stone as your mind grows softer and quieter, and sleep approaches in its own patient way. If you're still awake, you can come back gently without effort. You don't have to open your eyes. You don't have to do anything at all. Just notice that you're here, in a quiet place with your body supported. Notice the slow honesty of your breath rising and falling, and if your mind feels like it's hovering between waking and sleep, that is a good place to be. That is the shoreline, a soft boundary where one state becomes another. There's nothing to remember right now, nothing to solve. You can let the story become simpler, like a tune you don't have to follow note by note. You can let it rock you. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, tiny letters, a boundary, a pattern, a patient tide. You can imagine these words as small stones laid in a line across a shallow stream. You don't have to step on every stone. You can simply know they're there and let yourself drift past them. Somewhere in the deep past, the earth keeps turning quietly. It does not hurry. It does not worry. It simply moves, bringing day and night again and again like slow blinking. Day brings warmth. Night brings coolness. Water gathers, water evaporates, water returns again, and in that repeating chemistry has many chances. It is not one moment, it is many. Many small meetings, many small separations, many small returns. If you like, you can picture the ocean as a giant breathing creature, calm and steady. Not dramatic, not alive in a literal sense, just a gentle image. The ocean inhales as it rises, exhaling as it falls back. Tide in, tide out. The moon's pull quiet and constant. And where the ocean touches rock, the story becomes intimate. Small places, shallow pools, tiny pores inside stone. Places where molecules can gather simply because space is smaller there. Inside a pore, a few molecules rest against a mineral surface. Some stick, some slide, some line up in a loose way. Not perfect, not planned, just closer together than they would be in open water. Cycles come, wet and dry, warm and cool, and the same few molecules meet again and again, like strangers who become familiar because they keep passing on the same path. And then, in that gentle repeating, a boundary forms, a membrane, a bubble, a soft container. It happens because certain molecules prefer it. Their shapes and charges and watery likes and dislikes guide them into that arrangement. Heads toward water, tails tucked away, a little wall that is not rigid but flexible, alive with motion. Inside, outside, a simple difference. And once you have an inside, you can have a slightly different chemistry than the outside. You can have more meetings inside, more chances for reactions to happen. If you want, you can let that reminder feel personal and calming. You also have an inside and an outside. Your skin, your blankets, or your room, or your bed, boundaries that allow you to soften. A safe interior space where rest can happen. Now, imagine that inside the bubble, there are a few tiny chains, not long, not complex, just short strings of units like beads. Some chains might carry patterns like a sequence, and under the right conditions, those patterns can be copied because matching units like to pair. A ribbon of letters, a template, a gentle trace. The copying is imperfect, and that imperfection allows variation. Small differences appear like handwriting shifting from one copy to the next. Most variations don't matter. Some make a chain less stable. Those chains are hidden. Some variations make a chain a little more stable. Those chains last a little longer. And when something lasts a little longer, it has more chances to be copied. Not through ambition, not through struggle, just through persistence. Staying is quiet. Staying is gentle. Staying is what happens when the pieces fit. So slowly, over many, many cycles, patterns that persist become more common. And that is the beginning of evolution in its softest form. A slow accumulation of what works, guided by time. And time is so patient. If you're awake, you can feel that patience in this moment. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to fix. The night is allowed to unfold slowly. And if you're drifting, you can let the patience carry you. Now the explanations can become even lighter. We can keep only the simplest truths and let the rest fade into the background like distant music. Membranes form naturally. Patterns repeat. Copying with variation allows change. Membranes form naturally. Patterns repeat. Copying with variation allows change. And between those phrases, you can let your breathing fill the space. Let the sentences leave room like pauses between waves. In, out, in, out. Your breath is a repeating pattern too, a gentle loop, a calm cycle. It keeps spitting even when you don't pay attention. It's one of the quiet proofs that life is a process that continues. Now, imagine a slow journey downward again, but this time with fewer details, like a dream simplifying itself. Stars above, steady points of light. Clouds below, drifting in soft layers. Ocean beneath, dark and wide. Shoreline, gentle and small. A pool, still and shallow. A bubble, round and quiet. Inside, a few molecules drifting, a chain, holding a pattern. A second chain forming beside it. Not perfectly, just enough for a pattern to return, just enough for time to notice it, just enough for the story to continue, and you can rest inside the phrase, just enough. It is a lovely phrase for sleep too. You don't need perfect calm, you don't need perfect silence, you only need enough softness, enough safety, enough letting go. Sleep can begin with enough. A slower exhale, a heavier shoulder, a softer forehead, a thought that loses its edge. Enough. And as you listen, you might feel your mind doing something similar to those early chemical systems, gently repeating, gently settling, trying different arrangements of thoughts until one becomes stable enough to hold, and then until even that arrangement dissolves into rest. Now, let's let the natural world return, but as a quiet background rather than a focus. Waves continue, rocks continue, rain continues, mist continues, and in tiny places, chemistry continues. You don't need to picture volcanoes or storms. You can keep it calm, just warmth in stone, and water moving in patient cycles. The oldest lullaby, repetition, wet and dry, warm and cool, day and night, in and out, wet and dry, warm and cool, day and night, in and out, and through that gentle repetition complexity can build, not because it is planned, but because the universe is allowed to be creative when it has time. Sometimes it helps to remember that life is not separate from the world. Life is made of the world. The same atoms that make oceans and rocks and air also make your body. The same rules that shape bubbles and drops also shape membranes and cells. This is not meant to make life feel ordinary. It's meant to make the universe feel tender. The universe has room for delicate things, and you are one of those delicate things resting now, safe inside your boundaries, breathing quietly. Now, very gently, bring your attention to your chest for a moment, or to your belly, wherever you feel the breath most clearly. Notice that each inhale arrives and each exhale leaves. You don't need to control it. You can simply allow it, like allowing waves. As you exhale, imagine that warm inner light again, low and steady, not bright, not demanding, just a soft glow that says, "You're here and you're safe." And now we can let the science become almost like a mantra. Plain, rhythmic, kind. Water brings molecules together. Time gives them chances. Boundaries hold them close, patterns repeat. Copying allows change. Water brings molecules together. Time gives them chances. Boundaries hold them close, patterns repeat. Copying allows change. And when you hear repetition, you can let it do what repetition does best. It can soothe, it can lull, it can gently smooth the mind like waves smoothing sand. If you're still awake, you might notice your thoughts becoming less interested in grabbing, less interested in holding, more content to drift. That's good. That's sleep approaching. Now imagine a single tiny bubble again, not in sharp focus, just as a soft circle. Inside it, a few molecules drift like slow-moving stars in a small sky. They bump softly, they separate, they drift again. One small chain forms, then another. A pattern appears and fades, until one pattern lasts a little longer. And then, because it lasts longer, it has more chances to be copied. And then slowly, there are more of it. Not because anyone decided, because time allowed it. Because chemistry can be patient, because the world repeats itself. Now you might be wondering, if you're still awake, when does that become life? And you can let that question soften too. You don't need an exact moment. The beginning of life is likely a gradual brightening, a dawn. First molecules, then building blocks, then patterns, then boundaries, then copying, then networks, then systems that persist and adapt, and somewhere along that slope the word life begins to fit. But you don't need to label it tonight. Tonight, you can simply enjoy the softness of a world where simple things can become more organized without being forced. A world where time is kind enough to let small patterns try again and again. And as that thought settles, we can connect it to you one more time lightly, like a hand resting gently on a shoulder. Your body is made of countless cells, each one with its own membrane, its own boundary. Each one carrying information, copying it. Each one using energy, maintaining gradients, balancing inside and outside. All of it's happening now, quietly while you rest. You are being kept alive by gentle repetition. Breath repeating, heartbeat repeating, cells repeating their work. And that can be deeply comforting. You don't have to manage life consciously. Life knows how to continue itself. It has had a long time to learn, billions of years of quiet practice. So when you feel tired, you can trust your body's ancient intelligence. You can let it take over. You can let the conscious mind loosen its grip. Now the story can become even more dreamlike. We can let the images blur into calm textures, a dark ocean, a dim shoreline, a warm stone, a small pool, a bubble, a slow chain, a soft glow, and your bed here, now, as another kind of safe pool, another kind of boundary, another kind of quiet inside. If your mind wants to wander into your personal worries, you can treat them like leaves on water. Notice them, then let them drift downstream. You don't have to chase them, you don't have to fix them in the night. Night is for lowering the volume, night is for resting. And if it helps, you can whisper to yourself silently that it's okay to pause your problems until morning. You can return to them when you're rested. For now, you can be like the ocean, repeating steady, untroubled by the small ripples on the surface. Now, let's slow the pace even more. Let the sentences stretch out. Let there be more space between them. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, letters, inside, outside, repeat. In, out, out, in, out. A patient tide, a patient breath, a patient night. If you feel yourself slipping, you don't need to hold on. You can let go as much as you want. Sleep can take you in small waves. And if you're still awake, that's okay too. You can simply keep listening, letting the rhythm do its gentle work. Now we'll bring everything toward a quiet, open ending, not a sharp finish, just a gradual fade. So, softly, we can summarize in a few calm strokes. The early Earth offered water, warmth, minerals, and time. Chemistry formed building blocks. Those building blocks sometimes organized themselves into patterns. Some of those patterns were held inside simple boundaries, membrane bubbles. Some patterns could be copied imperfectly, and imperfect copying allowed variation, and variation over time allowed certain patterns to persist more often. And from that slow persistence, life began to take shape, not all at once, but gradually, like dawn. You don't need to remember these strokes. You can let them pass through you like a warm breeze. You've done enough today. Your body has carried you, your mind has carried you, and now you can rest. If there are unfinished things waiting for you, they can wait a little longer. The night is not asking for productivity. It is asking for softness. So support. Take one more gentle breath in and let it out slowly. And as you exhale, imagine the shoreline again, dim and quiet under a wide sky. The ocean breathing, the small pool holding still water, a tiny bubble floating near the surface, a soft boundary holding a small inside. And imagine that, in your own way, you are like that bubble tonight. A safe inside held by a gentle boundary. A warm glow of life continuing quietly without effort. You're safe. It's okay to drift. It's okay to forget. It's okay to fall asleep. Good night. And if sleep hasn't come yet, you can simply keep resting here, listening to the slow tide of words, letting them fade and thin, like mist over dark water, until there's only quiet and breath and the soft, patient night. And as you rest there with the night around you like a soft curtain, you can let everything become even quieter. If you're already asleep, these words can simply float by like distant wind through trees, not needing your attention. And if you're still awake, that's okay too. You can stay exactly as you are. There is no hurry here. Let your breathing be the most important sound in and out, the slowest, simplest rhythm in and out. Somewhere far back in time, the earth kept the same kind of rhythm, not with lungs, not with intention, but with cycles. Warmth arriving and fading, water rising and falling, day turning to night, night returning to day. You can imagine that ancient world again as a gentle landscape, not sharp, not detailed, just soft shapes. A wide ocean, dark and calm. A shoreline, smooth and patient. A warm stone holding a little heat. A small pool gathered like a quiet thought. And within it, tiny movements, tiny meetings, molecules drifting, molecules touching, molecules separating, and then touching again. It's soothing to remember that the beginning of life was not a single event that had to be perfect. It was more like a long, slow practice, like waves repeating the same motion until the rock becomes smooth, like a lullaby sung so many times that it becomes familiar, and familiarity becomes comfort. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, tiny letters, inside, outside, repeat. You can let those words be like gentle footsteps, passing by without needing to be followed. And if your mind wants to hold on to something, let it hold on to just one idea. The world repeats, and in repeating, the world learns what can last. Not with a mind, not with a plan, but with a quiet kind of patience. Things that fall apart quickly are gone. Things that hold together are still there. And because they're still there, they can be part of what comes next. This is the soft heart of it. Persistence. Gentle persistence. A pattern returning. A boundary holding. A cycle continuing. Even your own rest is a kind of persistence. Your body keeps you going through the night without asking you to supervise it. Your breath continues. Your heart continues. Your cells continue their quiet work, the way the ocean continues to move even when no one is watching. So tonight, you can let your body do what it knows how to do. You can let yourself be carried. Now, if it feels comfortable, take a slow breath in, as if you're sipping cool night air, and let it out like warm fog on a window. A little longer on the exhale if you can, not forced. Just softly extended. As you exhale, imagine the muscles in your face loosening as if they're remembering how to rest. The tiny places that hold tension without you noticing. The forehead smoothing, the eyelids heavy, the jaw slackening, the tongue resting gently inside the mouth, and then your shoulders dropping a little more, your arms heavy and quiet, your hands letting go, your belly soft, your legs sinking toward sleep. You don't have to do this perfectly, you can simply let the description be a suggestion, like a warm breeze going through a room. And now the story becomes more meditative, more repetitive, like waves. Imagine again the small pool on the ancient shore. It's still, not frozen, just calm. The surface is dark, with a faint sheen. Around it, stone and mineral steady and quiet. In the water, tiny molecules float, like dust motes in a beam of light. They bump softly into one another. Sometimes they stick, sometimes they don't. And because the world repeats, because wet and dry cycles return, because warmth and coolness alternate, those same molecules meet again. Meeting is important. Repetition is important, because repetition makes chance less lonely. A single chance may pass without anything lasting, but repeated chances over long time allow patterns to appear, so the universe tries again, and again, and again, without frustration, without impatience, just gentle return membranes form naturally. It's one of those comforting sentences you can keep. Membranes form naturally. Certain molecules, the ones with water-loving heads and water-avoiding tails, prefer to arrange themselves into thin layers, like a silky fabric folding in water. When those layers close into a sphere, they make a bubble, a boundary, a soft inside, outside, a simple difference. And in that difference, chemistry can become more intimate. Patterns repeat. Another comforting sentence, patterns repeat. Because day repeats, night repeats, tides repeat, evaporation repeats, rain repeats, and when a reaction happens once, it can happen again. When a chain forms once, it can form again. When a useful arrangement appears, it might appear again. Copying with variation allows change, and this one is gentle too. Copying with variation allows change. Because early copying was imperfect, and imperfection creates small differences, and those differences let time do its quiet filtering, not as punishment, not as competition, just as a soft sorting. Things that last tend to be around more often. You can let these 3 sentences rock you. Membranes form naturally. Patterns repeat. Copying with variation allows change. Membranes form naturally, patterns repeat. Copying with variation allows change, and between them you can let your breath fill the space like a slow tide. In, out, in, out. Now, imagine a drifting journey, as though your attention is a feather floating downward. First, the stars. You don't have to see them clearly, just the sense of open space, wide and quiet, with tiny lights that do not blink in a hurry. Then down toward a planet, a round shape, calm and distant. Then closer, toward the thin skin of atmosphere. Then clouds, soft layers like blankets spread out. Then the ocean, dark and vast, mown heavy with time. Then the shoreline where water becomes shallow and gentle. Then the small pool, resting in stone. Then the bubble, floating like a tiny moon. And inside the bubble, a small sky of molecules. A few chains, a few patterns, nothing dramatic, just enough. And you can rest on that phrase again, just enough. Because just enough is how beginnings happen. And just enough is how sleep happens too. You don't need to fall asleep all at once, you can drift into it. A little more relaxed on one breath, a little heavier on the next, a little more distant from thoughts, until your mind simply stops trying to hold itself up and lets the bed and the night take over. Now, if your thoughts come in, you can greet them kindly. Oh, there you are. And then let them pass, like clouds passing across the moon, like leaves passing on a slow stream. You don't have to chase them. You don't have to argue with them. You can let them drift out of the room. And you can return to the simple motifs. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, letters, a boundary, a pattern, a patient tide. Water bring molecules together. Time gives them chances. Boundaries hold them close. Patterns repeat. Copying allows change. Water brings molecules together. Time gives them chances. Boundaries hold them close. Patterns repeat. Copying allows change. With each repetition, the mind usually softens a little more. The need to track becomes less urgent. The language becomes more like a calm hum. And now we can offer a few tiny, sleepy micro-lessons, each one simple enough to hold for a moment and then let go. A membrane is not a wall. It's a soft boundary, like a curtain, letting some things pass and keeping other things close. And after that thought, you can exhale. A pattern does not need to be perfect, and it only needs to repeat. And after that thought, you can let your shoulders sink. Variation does not have to be dramatic. It can be a small change like handwriting shifting, and time will gently notice what lasts. And after that thought, you can let your jaw loosen. Gradients are differences, and nature likes to smooth differences, and in that smoothing, energy can flow. And after that thought, you can let your eyelids feel heavy, even if they already are. And now we return to quiet repetition again, so the facts don't pile up. Membranes form naturally. Patterns repeat. Copying with variation allows change, and you can let your mind slide gently into the background. There is something peaceful about imagining the earliest evolution as almost silent. No fans, no cheering, no sudden triumph. Just tiny molecular quirks that made something a little more stable, a little more likely to last, a little more likely to be copied. Tiny changes, not shouted, just kept. Your body does things that way too. It doesn't demand that healing happen instantly. It repairs slowly. It balances slowly. It returns to calm slowly. And that's okay. If you're someone who feels pressured by the idea of progress, it can be comforting to borrow the ancient pace of the earth. Slow is not wrong. Slow is natural. Slow is how complexity is built. Slow is how rest restores you. Now imagine the ancient shoreline again, but let it be even softer, like a watercolor. The ocean is a dark wash of color. The sky is deeper. The edges are blurred. The world is warm and quiet. A gentle hiss of water on stone like a whisper. In a shallow pool, the surface is still. And in the stillness, small things happen. A molecule meets another. A chain forms. A chain breaks. A chain forms again. A bubble drifts by. A bubble gathers molecules. A bubble divides. Not perfectly, just enough, and again, just enough, and again and again. The repetition is soothing, and you can let it be soothing for you too. Your breath repeats, in, out, in, out. Your heartbeat repeats, not loud, just steady. Your mind repeats certain thoughts sometimes, and now those thought loops can begin to unwind slowly, like a knot being loosened by a gentle fingers. Now, if you like, imagine that warm inner light again. A small lantern glow inside your chest or belly. With each inhale, it brightens slightly. With each exhale, it softens and spreads. Not into brightness, just into warmth. Warmth that says you are safe. Warmth that says you can let go. Warmth that says the night is holding you. And as that warmth spreads, the story can broaden outward again, in the calmest possible way. Starlight is ancient too. Some of the light you see in the night sky began its journey long before you were born, travelling through space in quiet patience. It doesn't rush, it doesn't hurry, it simply arrives. And life on Earth, in its own way, is a continuation of the same patient universe. Atoms meeting, bonds forming, patterns repeating, boundaries holding, and then the long unfolding into forests, oceans full of plankton, animals and plants, and eventually you, here, resting. Not as a dramatic climax, but as a gentle continuation, and if you ever feel small or overwhelmed by the size of the universe, you can hold a comforting thought. Small things matter. A single boundary can change what happens inside it. A single repeating pattern can become common. A single deep breath can change your nervous system. A single quiet night can help restore you. Small is not insignificant. Small is where beginnings live. Now the words can become more rhythmic again, like the ocean itself. A boundary, a pattern, a patient tide, a boundary, a pattern, a patient tide, inside, outside, water moving, stone waiting, time passing, mind softening, breath repeating. If you notice you're still awake, you don't need to judge it. You can simply notice and then return to the rhythm. Sleep is not a performance. It comes when it comes. If you notice you're half asleep, even more better. That floating sensation, that gentle slipping is exactly what you're allowed to do, and you can let your awareness become less focused, more drifting, like an anchor line loosening in calm water. Now, let's simplify again. Water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, letters, water, warmth, minerals, bubbles, letters. And if you want even fewer words, fewer shapes, you can hold only this. Water and time, because water brings things together and time gives them chances. Water and time. Now, imagine a slow motion scene of the tide coming in. The water rises, covering rock, filling pores, filling pools. Molecules drift in the water, carried gently. Then the tide goes out. Water lowers, pools remain, water evaporates slowly. Molecules become closer. Closer means more meetings means more chances. Then water returns again, repeat. There is a kindness in repetition because it doesn't demand perfection in any single moment. It allows many tries, and now you can let that kindness apply to you. If today wasn't perfect, you still get to rest. If your mind is messy tonight, you still get to sleep. If you don't relax instantly, you still get to soften gradually. You're allowed to be human. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to be held by the night. Now, the story can begin to fade into something almost like pure atmosphere, a background hum of calm ideas. A small bubble, a soft boundary, a few molecules inside, a pattern repeating, a pattern changing slightly, time noticing what lasts, and realizing slowly that something is beginning. Not with fireworks, not with trumpets, just with continuity, just with again, and when you are falling asleep you do something similar. You stop thinking next and start thinking again the breath, again the exhale, again the sinking of the body, again the letting go. So if you want, you can let your attention return to your exhale in and let it be slightly longer than the inhale, in and a longer out. In and a longer out. Each exhale is like the tide going out, leaving the shore calmer. Each exhale is like warmth spreading and then settling. Each exhale is a signal to the body that it is safe to rest. Now we can offer one last gentle open reflection and then let everything taper off. The beginning of life is not only a scientific question, it's also a reminder that the universe can give rise to softness, to delicate organization, to warmth maintained against the vastness, to patterns that carry forward, and you are one of those patterns, a living boundary, is it? A living rhythm, a living continuation. You don't have to do anything to earn that, you already are it. So tonight, you can simply rest as the pattern of you continues quietly, tended by biology, tended by breath, tended by the calm of the night. And now, we'll let the words become fewer, like a room dimming toward darkness. Water, time, boundary, pattern, breath. Water, time, boundary, pattern, breath. In, out, in, out. A patient tide, a patient night, a patient sleep. And if sleep comes now, you can let it take you fully without holding on to the last sentence. If sleep comes later, you can keep floating in this quiet space until it arrives. Either way, you are safe. Good night, and you can let the shoreline fade, and the ocean soften, and the bubble drift, and the warm light inside you settle into a steady hush, until there is only breath, and darkness and rest, and the gentle feeling of the night continuing on and on, without needing anything from you.